tears were welling up in my eyes. And I was just like, I can't have anything. Like nothing is mine, not even kombuchas. Like everything belongs to everyone else and I have nothing. I have no home, I have no dog anymore. I have nothing. And I can't even have this kombucha in the refrigerator. And I was really feeling deeply tender and sad about how much I felt like I have lost. It can be hard in the midst of so much violence, oppression, and despair to believe in a just, loving, and compassionate world. I'm also clear that if ever we need a collective hold of that possibility, it is now. Mundane Miracles with Sonya Renee Taylor is a weekly podcast where I share stories, reflections, anecdotes, and epiphanies from my daily existence in an effort to collect evidence that life is truly loving and kind, full of intention, guiding us all toward greater love, grace, and compassion, proving that if we learn to look and listen, we will hear and see that life is indeed unfolding for our highest good. Join me each week as I share weekly evidence that life is happening on purpose with radical love in service of our highest good, even when it sucks, especially when it sucks.
When I let my grief take up all the space of 1,000 oceans that were washing over me every day, I have to say, I felt joy, oh boy, I felt unexpected, unusual, surprising waves of joy.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Mundane Miracles, a weekly podcast where I collect evidence that life is indeed unfolding on purpose, in radical love, in service of our highest good, even when it sucks. I am your host, Sonya Renee Taylor, and I am so excited to be with you all. I want to be really transparent. That's my goal in this podcast, is to tell the truth. In the age of social media, folks are so often angling to look good, to say the right thing, to, amass the most followers by having an Instagrammable, Pinterestable life or existence. And if you all know me, anybody who's been following me or following my work over the years, I'm as likely to show up the way I look today, like fly, as I am to show up in my bathrobe with sleep in my eyes and boogers and food on my night clothes. Like I'm always gonna aspire to be the most authentic version of myself. And so that also means being really authentic about this process. I want to be so honest and say that I'm not doing this podcast because I got this, right? Because I deeply embody and move through life like it is indeed on purpose and in radical love in service of my highest good, even when it sucks. That's why it's called collecting evidence, because I'm in an experiment of sorts. I actually do believe that I have collected enough evidence, and that is why this podcast is mostly a storytelling podcast where I share the experiences that I've been through that are reflections of this premise that life is intentional, this premise that life is inherently loving. And it doesn't always feel that way, y'all. And I want to be really honest that I'm in a season where it doesn't feel that way. Tomorrow is the 12-year anniversary. It marks 12 years since my mother transitioned to Ancestor, Terry Lynn Johnson. And October sucks. And I assume you probably won't actually even hear this podcast in October. This is probably going to air sometime in November. But thank you for being in the future and holding me through this season. That's really what this experience is right now, is that I am seeding with you all today that I made it through this season. And that's why you're hearing this story, because you all have helped me traverse what is a really difficult season for me in general. And this year, as you may know, I'm also going through a transition of a romantic relationship. And so I'm in heartbreak and I'm in grief and I'm in sadness. And One of the things that is true, as I'm saying it right now in real time, is we're going to talk about astrology on this podcast because I'm deep in it. And all the time, I am seeing how the planets are impacting my life. And so at the time of this recording, we are in a full moon in Aries. And this full moon in Aries, Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It is the energy of inception, of beginnings, of going, but it's also the energy of self motivation, self inquiry, and it's also the energy of aggression and frustration. And it is ruled by the planet Mars that governs our energy of aggression, our energy of anger, our energy of catalytic energy. Mars is giving real testosterone vibes. So I always feel full moons very intensely. They often signify completion. I also find them to represent saturation. I, as a Scorpio, as I've mentioned before, am a water sign. And so I feel emotions. And I'm a Cancer moon. So I just am one big, giant emotional conduit. Full moons, I often feel like a sponge, like I'm just sitting in the intensity of the emotion. And so this Aries full moon, Aries is often like, what are you going to do? It's due energy. And Aries in my chart, in my birth chart, where it was when I was born, is in Chiron, which is our wounded healer. And it represents your core wound. It represents the thing that is tender in your life that you're here to learn to work with, right? And to here to learn to understand it, to investigate it, to get to the source of it. And it may always be tender, but by learning to work with it, you actually provide some of your own greatest gifts to others. It is how we become healers to other folks, and it's through the navigation of our own wounds. And so my core wound, my Chiron, is in the fourth house, which is the house of home, the house of our parents. And my core wound is my mother. And so this full moon is like, hey, tomorrow's the day your mom died. And here's all the energetic resonance about what it feels like that your mom died and all the stories that come with it. And here are all the deepest fears that live in you as a result of those wounds. Hi, welcome to your weekend, Sonya. Now go record a podcast about how there is evidence that life is happening on purpose, in radical love, in service of our highest good, even when it sucks. And I'm definitely in the it sucks part. And it is times like this is why I created this podcast, is because I could come home and get in my bed and tell myself the story that I'm utterly alone and no one's priority and it doesn't matter and everything I love is gone. I could tell myself that story, and it's a very tempting story in this right now moment. Or I could come and tell myself a story about kombucha. And that is what I want to talk to us today. The story that's sort of percolating in me is called At the Level of Kombucha. And really, what I am experiencing in this story is how, even at the smallest level, at the level that seems minute, life is conspiring on our behalf. And it's those kinds of moments that actually make all of this doable. And so I want to share this fun, sweet story. So for the last 2.5 years, I've been roaming the planet, displaced is the right way to say it. When I left New Zealand in 2022, I thought I was coming to the US for a 5-week tour. And I haven't been back to New Zealand since. It's been 3 years. My mother's ashes are in New Zealand. I had a dog in New Zealand. I thought I was going back. And we will absolutely talk about that at some point in one of these episodes. But I've been on the road. And so, if you may remember from a few minutes ago, I told you my core wound is in the fourth house, which means my core wound is about home. And I've been without a quote unquote home for nearly 3 years. And It's been really uncomfortable and really painful sometimes. And it's also been glorious and magical. And people always tell me, like, wow, I wish I could live life like you, Sonya. And I often tell them, be careful what you ask for because you just might get it. But I've had angels along the way who have been so incredibly loving and kind and generous to have really provided me with the feeling of home while I've been on this journey. And one of those humans is my good girlfriend, Adrienne Marie Brown. You may know Adrienne because she is her own brilliant, badass seer, prophetess, midwifing the new world, visionary writer, author, creator, creative. And she and I did a project together called the Institute of Radical Permission, which will have its resurgence in 2025. And so keep your eyes and ears open for that. It's going to be an amazing time. It was such an amazing offering, and we can't wait to share it again. All of that is neither here nor there. The point is, Adrienne travels for her work and is often away from her home. And so I've been schlepping about, staying in way too many Airbnbs and being very over them as a corporation and over housing crisis that it exacerbates with all these folks running Airbnbs in places where there's shortages of housing. And so anyway, Adrienne has been generous enough to let me house sit for her when she's traveling. And Adrienne lives as closely. There's only one other person who lives similarly to the way that I used to live when I had a house. Carla Hall, the amazing chef, she and her husband Matthew, when I walked into their house, they had chairs and they were the same color and same material as my chairs in New Zealand. And they had all of this amazing stuff that was like, oh, this is like my old house, except they have way more fabulous artwork than I ever had. But Adrienne is the second closest. It's like if my spirit room in my old house had moved to all the areas of the house, that is what Adrienne's home is, full of plants and oracle decks and tarot decks and incense and salves for your body and massagers and bright colors and a huge TV and great music and incense and gorgeous art and things to look at and phenomenal books and amazing food in her refrigerator and like white truffle oil. And she don't even cook like that, but she's got a refrigerator. Should you cook like that, you could cook like that. It's one of the things that I love about Adrienne. And she's like, I'm ready for whatever. I'm ready for whatever you was ready for before you knew you was ready for it. And so Adrienne had let me stay in her home and house sit for her. And I've been doing that since 2023. And I always have an amazing time. It's always just so restorative. You know, it's the feeling of being home, which is something that I've very much longed for. I think the thing that's important to know about where I am right now in my own journey is the reason that I'm able to collect evidence is because I have been deeply practicing listening to spirit. I have been deeply practicing listening to how life is trying to communicate with me. And I don't have a take in any specific religious doctrine. I am not here to proselytize any particular faith orientation. I am here to collect evidence and share this evidence with you that there is something, some things, there is energy in this world that is working with us. And you get to call it whatever you want to call it. I call that energy God. I call that energy source. I call that energy the universe. I call that energy love. I call that energy spirit. I call the other manifestations of that energy spirit guides. I call it my ancestors. I try to cast a really wide net in terms of understanding how much I cannot understand. and it does not serve me to try to corral or wrangle into definition these larger, clear machinations that are at play in our lives and in the world. But I'm clear they are at play. I move with those and have had firsthand experiences that I'll continue to share with you all around how those energies have unfolded in my life. And so I get nudges, I get messages, I get, again, we will talk about some of these things. I get literal auditory messages. I also get what some folks call downloads, you know, whatever, however you want to language it. Information be coming through here is my point. And I've gotten more intentional about listening to that information, particularly so that my life isn't as uncomfortable as it is when I don't listen to that information. And so sometimes I get told things and I don't know why I'm getting told them and I don't know why. But I wanted to give that as an important sort of piece of framework for this experience. And so anyway, it was one of my visits where I'm staying at Adrian's house. She has invited me to come back, and I have permission to share this story, by the way. I'm not just like putting Adrian's business out in the street. She told me I could share it. And she sends me a message before I get there and she says, "Hey, Sonya, a couple of things. I have some kombuchas in the back of my fridge, and they're like special edition kombuchas." Adrian's the kind of person who has special edition kombuchas, like the special seasonal ones. She has those, and she collects them so that she has them even when the season changes. I told you she stay ready, and so she said, like I only have a few from this past season, and so could you not drink my kombuchas? And in a normal world, right? In a normal world, on a normal day, I'm like, "Sure, of course." And that's what I said to her. I was like, "Yeah, absolutely, no problem." I arrived to Adrian's house, and all I know is that that day there was a Chiron transit. That's what I can tell you is that that wounded healer asteroid spinning through the galaxy was spinning through some aspect of my chart. And I was deep in my feels of being without home. And I opened the fridge and I saw those kombuchas back there. And I felt so sad and displaced and without belonging, And I found myself going so deep into the story of really fighting off. I didn't go deep, but I could feel it. Like someone had turned on a faucet and put in a stopper and the like water was just getting ready to brim up and overflow. That's what it felt like in my body. And I was in the grocery store getting groceries and tears were welling up in my eyes. And I was just like, I can't have anything. Like nothing is mine, not even kombuchas. Like everything belongs to everyone else and I have nothing. I have no home, I have no dog anymore. I have nothing. And I can't even have this kombucha in the refrigerator. And I was really feeling deeply tender and sad about how much I felt like I have lost.
Hey you, hey you, hey you, hey you, hey you, hey you,
There's a much longer story about all of that will come later on in the season. We'll talk about the concept of loss. I get back to the house and maybe it's the next day and I'm still, like I'm really still just moving through this energy and feeling sad and funky. And oh, when I went to the grocery store, I went to the grocery store and was like, "I'll buy my own kombuchas. Fine by me." And so I bought 2 kombuchas. Now, here's another piece of information that you should know that's really important. I get hives, and hives are one of these aspects of communication that happen via my body when it's trying to alert me of something. The energetic field is trying to give me information. And so I get hives if I'm about to eat something that isn't going to be good for me. I get hives. I used to think it was because I was thinking about doing something I shouldn't do. Like my thoughts are giving me hives, right? That's what I used to think. That has been disproven throughout the investigation of the hives. And actually, what I've realized is what's happening is I get hives when I move into an energetic field that is out of alignment. And out of alignment can mean a lot of things. So sometimes, yes, it does mean that my thoughts are about to go someplace that isn't in service of my highest good. And then I'll get a little hive on my arm or on my finger, on the back of my hand. It took me a year and a half. I mean, it took me longer than that. But when I started like really investigating and not just thinking of it as a like physiological phenomenon of using some bad detergent or something, after I had done all the investigations and ruled out all of that, I realized that I was getting the hives when I was about to make a choice that wasn't necessarily in my highest good. And so I was like, okay, the hives are telling me not my highest good. Fine, fine, fine. And then I started getting them, but I would get them even when it wasn't a choice I was making. They were alarm hives, like energetic alarm hives. They were telling me about something being in my field before I knew it. Quick example, quick tangent. I promise we'll come back to why this is important. I once was going into a restaurant. I was in Ecuador. And as soon as I walked in, I started having hives and I was itchy. And I was like, Dad, I haven't even got nothing. Sometimes I would get them if I was like about to eat some unhealthy thing instead of making a healthier choice. And so I was like, I'm not fine. I'm just going to get some hummus. And so, like, I order hummus and then I order a veggie burrito. And the hives persist. They persist through the veggie burrito. And it's just a veggie burrito. It's like literally just some vegetables, some rice, and a tortilla. It's nothing out of the ordinary. The hives persist through my ordering with the waiter, through all the things. I order my burrito, 20 minutes pass, 15 minutes pass, it comes. The hive's still there. It hasn't settled. It hasn't like gone full loco, which it'll do sometimes, but it didn't go away. And I'm eating my burrito and I bite into it and I'm like, is that tastes awfully meaty. Now, I've been a vegan for approaching 3 years, and you will absolutely get the story of how Sonya went vegan without question. It is one of these episodes in the near future. But I've been a vegan for almost 3 years, and I'm biting into this burrito, and I'm like, some things taste meaty, and I pull it out, and it's steak. But it's not like a steak burrito. It's like somebody left some steak on the grill and wrapped up my burrito, and in it were bits of steak. The hives were alerting me that there was about to be something wrong with my burrito. Now, those hives knew there was something about to be wrong with my burrito before I knew I was ordering a burrito, before the waiter knew I was ordering a burrito, and before the chef began to cook it. From the moment I walked into the building, I had the hives. What I want you to know is our bodies are always communicating with us. They're not just communicating our thoughts, our bodies are beyond thought. They are not the subject of our thoughts. Our thoughts come much later. What happens first is energy. Energy is what happens first. An energetic field is what you enter into. And then there is a physiological response. And then our brains try to make sense of energy and physiology through thought. That's what's happening. That's the order of operations there, folks. My hives recognize energy and knew energetically that something was about to unfold that was not in alignment with what was best for my body, and began trying to alert me of that before I had made a thought about what I was going to eat. That is how finely attuned our entire systems are. And our systems are connected. My body knew I had entered into an energy that required at least 5 other people. It required the person I ordered the hummus from. It required the waiter who I ordered the burrito from. It required the chef who cooked the burrito. All parties were part of that energetic mix. And my body was knowing how that energy was going to play out before anybody in the equation had a thought about it. That is how powerful our systems are. That's a wild miracle in the midst of the mundane, right? And so I say all of that to say I get hives and they tell me stuff. So when I was on my fine, Adrian, I won't drink your kombuchas, I'll go buy my own, I got hives. Now, I don't always listen. I'm not perfect at this. This is practice and iteration and development. But I did go and I bought these kombuchas. And when I got them, I had some hives. And I was just like, whatever. And I ignored it. We're deep in my woo bag at this point. So you're going to see all the sort of like kooky, interesting tools that I use these days to learn how to hear the subtle, energetic movements that are happening in life. I've added lots of things to my tool bag. And so one of them is a woman that I listen to on Patreon, and she's also on YouTube. Her channel is called The Birthday Gift. And she used to do zodiac tarot readings and oracle card readings on YouTube. She's amazing. Her name is Natasha. The page is called The Birthday Gift. And I have been following her for 4 years. And to be a person I have never met, she stays in my business. She is a deeply attuned, intuitive being who really is tapped into collective energy. Certainly, at least the collective energy of the people she's called to read for. And she doesn't have a massive channel, but I certainly invite all of you all to go and subscribe because she's really brilliant. But after I had gone to my grocery store and I had my hives and I had, gotten my like revenge kombucha at Adrian's house, that night I was listening to The Birthday Gift and the daily guidance that she records. She does them Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So I'm listening to the daily guidance and I hear her say, I believe that there's a message. Your guides are trying to get you to stop like eating or drinking something. Somebody changed like a ingredient in the recipe or something, and it's not good for you. Your guides are asking you to stop. Now, what you should know is after I got my revenge kombucha and I drank it, whatever else, I absolutely had an upset stomach and like not nice situation bathroom wise. And I just attribute it to having eaten something that I shouldn't have eaten, right? Or something just didn't set right. I'm vegan. And so no one has more gas than a vegan. I am the fartingest being that has ever farted. And it's a result of changing my diet to veganism. It's outrageous. But nevertheless, I had this upset stomach and I didn't pay any mind to it. And then I hear Natasha of The Birthday Gift say someone has changed an ingredient in something and your guides are trying to get you not to drink it because it's not good for you. It's not sitting well with you. And then a little light bulb went off in me. And I was like, are they talking about the kombucha? They couldn't be talking about the kombucha. It's not possible that this random woman could be talking about the kombucha. But I decided to run a little experiment that night. And I was like, all right, I'm going to drink this kombucha and I'm going to see what happens. And so I made myself some food and I poured myself a glass of kombucha. And I made whatever I made for dinner was something that I know is like fine for my stomach. And so I know it's a thing that doesn't give me any issues. And I drank that kombucha. When I tell y'all that something started doing the cha-cha slide in my intestines, I had the most upset stomach for the rest of the evening. And it was so clearly the kombucha. It was so clearly the kombucha. And I was sitting there on the toilet and I stopped and I almost started crying. And it wasn't because, I was in such gastric distress, although I was definitely in some gastric distress. I was like, oh, when Adrian asked me not to drink her kombucha, first of all, when I talked to her about this, one of the things she said was like, I really had to like get up the courage to ask for this thing, to ask for something to just be mine. And she's the eldest of three sisters. And I know how hard it is to have something that's just yours inside of that family configuration. And it was a big deal for her to ask me to not drink her kombuchas. So life was both giving her a chance to practice doing this thing of advocating for herself and for something to belong to her, and also trying to protect me from something that was not going to serve me well. And the story I initially told myself about it was how life was yet again taking things from me and yet again reminding me of all the ways that I'm denied anything, happiness and ease and home and care. And like life is just always being mean to me. When what was actually happening was that life was taking care of me at the level of kombucha, at the level of, hey, there's this drink that's going to upset your stomach. And you don't have to have an upset stomach. You don't have to be in physical distress. And so here's this opportunity where this person you care about will get a chance to practice their own self advocacy and help you care for yourself at the same time. And I was in such awe and wonder that life is that on purpose, that life is that intentional, that life is that granular. Right? It makes me think of the gospel song, His eye is on the sparrow, and so I know he watches me. And I thought, like, right, there are forces, there is energy in this world that cares about me at the level of kombucha, that cares enough to make sure that I am well and healthy and thriving, and will help redirect me when I am making decisions that do not further that health and wellness and thriving. And all these parties that were involved, Adrian and Natasha from the birthday gift and my hives, all of these gifts of beings and energies, all of these gifts of energies trying to intercede on my behalf. And I want to offer to you all today, as I tell this story on the eve of my mother's transition, that it is helpful for me when the big stuff is really overwhelming, when the loss that is indeed feels like all of life, feels like the worst loss, feels like the most painful thing. When that is moving, it is profoundly helpful to remember that there are small, daily, regular ways that life is trying to care for me, that life is trying to care for us. And I really want to encourage you as you move through this week to look for the small ways that life is trying to tend to you, that it's trying to help you avoid discomfort, trying to help you avoid pain, trying to steer you toward homeostasis. And, I could have forfeited a few nights of gastric discomfort if my orientation toward life in that moment was that clearly this thing Adrian's asking for must be for both of our highest good. That's why it's unfolding this way. And so I hope that you'll just take that through this week, that life is absolutely trying to care for you at the level of kombucha. And I hope you find your kombucha moments, your own version of the small intentional ways that life is loving you. And I hope you'll share them in the show notes, in the comments, over on Instagram. If you're on my Patreon, which is Sonya Renee Taylor, Instagram, Sonya Renee Taylor, all the places. You can even email me at sonyarenee@sonyareneetaylor.com and share with me the ways in which life has shown you that it is trying to care for you at the level of kombucha. I can't wait to hear your stories. Let's collect evidence together and continue to move on in this journey of trusting and believing that even in its most painful and absurd developments, still life is indeed on purpose, in radical love, in service of our highest good, even when it sucks. This is Mundane Miracles with Sonya Renee Taylor. I hope that you will download, you will like, you will subscribe, you will listen to this as ritual. Make it a ritual. This practice of collecting evidence is our ritual that we do together to call into being a more loving, just, and compassionate world by recognizing that it's all around us. See you next week.
You think you are dying, but you are being born.
Mundane Miracles with Sonya Renee Taylor is produced by Sonya Renee Taylor, edited by Dr. Shannon Weber. Our opening music is Joy and Grief by Sean and Abigail Bingson of the Bingsons. Our closing song is Dying by the Bingsons. Join us in the ritual of collecting evidence by rating, commenting, and subscribing to Mundane Miracles on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can get early access to episodes and support our radical love work by becoming a member on Patreon at patreon.com/Sonya Renee Taylor. That's patreon.com/Sonya Renee Taylor.